Good morning, everyone. So, the time at the moment is 10 past 6 GMT, and I am half a tube of Pringles and several cans of Red Bull down. Um, it's been an evening of intrigue and also utter confusion, to be perfectly honest. Not even sure where to start. So, I mean, why don't we start with Florida? It's always you, isn't it, Florida? Always you. So let's take a look. So this will probably seem terribly disorganized. I'm just going to try and run through things piece by piece and go as much as possible in sort of chronological order um, in terms of how the events have unfolded over the last 5 or 6 hours. So essentially, Florida is where it all began, and you can see from the map at the moment, Florida is red, and it was a long path to turning red. Um, it definitely didn't look initially like that would be the case, and obviously the way that these states are counting ballots this year is slightly different. Um, we know that in Florida, a lot of the metro centers dumped their ballots first, and then a lot of the more Republican-leaning counties, especially those around the Panhandle, were sort of the last to report their numbers, and essentially that led to the state of play shifting over time, becoming more and more Republican until eventually at only about 5 a.m. they announced that it had been won by Donald Trump quite handily, actually by about 3 to 4%. It was a state that was projected to go to Joe Biden. Um, that hasn't turned out to be the case. A lot of analysts are trying to dig into that and understand why, and a lot of people are suggesting that this could be a misjudgment when polling the Latino slash Cuban heritage community in Florida, um, who apparently have broken for Trump in a much bigger way than I think had been previously anticipated. So that was the first real result in terms of battleground states. The next big result, I think, on this map is Ohio, and this was another one that was projected to be very close, um, but looks like it's not actually going to be that close. Trump seems to have won this one fairly handily. I think last time I checked the margin, it was by circa 8%. So, you know, it, not not anywhere near the kind of numbers that Biden needed to get to really challenge him there. What you'll also notice across this map is that essentially no state has flipped yet. Every single state has voted, or every state that's been declared up to now has voted along the same lines that they did in 2016. And I think this speaks a little bit to the amount of polarization that we're seeing at the moment in the states, because Trump has definitely increased his foothold in certain states, Florida and Ohio being two of them. But there are other areas of the US where Biden seems to have made up ground, and therefore it's providing a very mixed picture, and nothing is really making sense in terms of trends as a result of that. So, what does this mean? Given Biden's now lost Florida, he's lost Ohio, what is his path to victory? Well, to be plain, he didn't necessarily need those states at the start of the night. They would have delivered a knockout blow, but ultimately he has many paths to victory that don't necessarily mean picking up Florida or Ohio for that matter. What I will say is that no president since Kennedy has won the presidency without those states. So it does make it much more challenging for him. But there is still some good news for Democrats. So, firstly, Arizona, a state which has been voting Republican for decades and has undergone a pretty significant shift in demographics very recently, is currently about 6% lead for Democrats. So looking very favourable there, with about 80% of the votes being counted at this stage. But obviously, the other 20% still to go. That could change. So that's one little beacon of light for Joe. And then North Carolina was also looking promising at the start of the night. The first results we saw come in, very characteristic of the other sort of Sunbelt states, where it started off looking very blue and then over time shifted to purple, and then gradually the on the day vote seems to have caught up with the early vote and has resulted in effectively Trump now with a 1% leading margin, with something like 95% of the votes counted. So it's pretty much expected that North Carolina at this stage will go to Trump. Again, that is in line with 2016. The other state where there is a little bit of intrigue is Georgia. So Georgia's very nearly counted all of its votes. It's 85% counted. There is about a 5% margin between them at the moment. But one of the really important nuances there, and this is something that's currently being reflected on the New York Times' website, but not many others that I can see, is that the ballots that still need to be counted are mainly located in areas like Atlanta, which are very Democrat leaning. In fact, 80% of the ballots to be counted are all counties that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. And so therefore you could argue that, and indeed the New York Times is arguing, that Biden is actually looking more likely to win Georgia, which would be a very unexpected flip given everything around it seems to have stayed red. So a couple of glimpses of hope there, but the question is that enough? And the answer is no, not really. So essentially, picking up Arizona, picking up Georgia would take Biden closer to 270, but it wouldn't get him over the line. To get over the line, he really needs one of Wisconsin, Michigan. He could do with picking up the extra districts in Nebraska and Maine. But essentially, it's all going to come down once again to the Rust Belt in a very similar way to 2016. So Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania at the moment are between 50 and 80% fully counted. But if we remember, Pennsylvania is one of those states, which is accepting ballots that may arrive up to 3 days after the election, as long as they're postmarked before election day. And so counting in these states could go on all week, to be perfectly frank. And as a result, you could say that we're effectively in a bit of a deadlock until we see some movement within those Rust Belt states, or some more conviction in the results that are currently coming through. It looks like it's going to go right down to the wire, and it could all go down to Pennsylvania, and there's still quite a lot of votes to count there. So another thing that's happened is that Joe Biden came out at about 20 to 6, I think, in the morning, to basically put on a brave face for all intents and purposes, say to his supporters that he still has faith he's going to win, and that obviously I have to wait for all the votes to be counted, especially in those states that are going to take longer to do so. And just trying to set the narrative, I think, is the reason that he seems to have come out of the blocks first in terms of making a statement. Trump predictably immediately followed up with a tweet 10-15 minutes later saying that that effectively he was up big, and that the Democrats were trying to steal the election, and Twitter pretty much immediately took that tweet down, or at least marked it as misleading, as they have been doing with many of his tweets for weeks now. So a bit of posturing going on either side, and I think that's probably quite predictable at this stage. This is probably going to end in some kind of litigation inevitably. So it's good that well, it's a sort of matter of fact that neither side is going to be willing to concede, and this could drag out a little bit longer. The one thing I haven't mentioned are the House and the Senate races. So I'm coming on sort of NBC News's site here, which it's been a pretty reliable tool for me this evening. And in terms of the Senate races, the one thing to note is that there really haven't been that many flips, similar to the states. One of the flips was in Colorado. That was immediately offset by the Republicans picking up a seat in Alabama. And it looks like Kelly in Arizona, some of you may know, is the former astronaut. He looks to have won in Arizona. So potentially a +1 for the Dems. It's a little bit difficult to see where they might win some of those other seats that they were projected to win at the start of the evening. So Montana is looking very close. That's still too early to call at the moment. North Carolina is still in play, but looking increasingly unlikely for Cunningham. And the Georgia special election, which I didn't really go through in my previous video, but is I think what they call a sort of jungle ticket, where essentially they have many people on the ballot, and essentially they narrow it down to a final 2 and then do a bit of a runoff. That one won't be decided for some weeks yet. So those are all possible pickups for the Democrats, but seats that they were hopeful about, such as Maine, not looking too promising at the moment, to be perfectly frank. It's looking like it could be a very well-balanced Senate by the end of this. One little silver lining, though, for the Democrats is that they are now projected to hold the House, and essentially they may pick up 1 or 2 seats, but I mean, overall, again, the picture doesn't seem to look like it's going to change too greatly. So some good news for the Democrats in terms of the House, and it's still not impossible that they might gain control of the Senate as well. So those will obviously be important tools for them if they do lose the presidential election. But I guess we'll see how that all plays out. So it's been a very long night, and as you can see, the sun is starting to rise now here in the UK, and I'm still no closer to understanding who is going to be President of the United States come January. But I did sign up for this, so I only have myself to blame, and I'm very tired, but I'm going to continue to provide updates throughout the morning, and hopefully we'll get some more clarity as we start to go through the day, providing I don't collapse in some kind of sugar coma or a heap of exhaustion, which is, I mean, it's as likely as anything at this stage. So, you know, I hope this has been useful. I have no idea if it has been, but, you know, it's been cathartic for me. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned.